we have our last speaker of the day, and thank you so much to everybody who's been involved and with questions. So Kate Bryan is our last speaker today. So Kate is a co-founder of the patient charity, the Fertility Alliance. She has worked with patient support and advocacy for many years and is an honorary fellow of the RCOG, where she was the first Women's Voices lead. She is a former member of the HFEA and is on the the NICE Fertility Guidance Committee. She's an author of 5 patient books about fertility and pregnancy, and she's really just going to give us an overview of the side of fertility that is devastating for our patients. So thank you so much, Kate, for being involved. Let me know if you can hear this okay.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to join you this afternoon. My name's Kate Bryan.
Yes,
I'm one of the founders.
Emily, we can't hear it anymore.
Supporting patients for more than 20 years now, and I'm also a former patient myself. And today I'm here to talk to you about support for fertility patients. So how do you think your patients think you are doing in terms of patient support? Well, I suspect most of you probably think you're doing okay in your clinics. And the HFEA did a patient survey last year, which was published this year, and surveyed around 1,500 UK fertility patients. It was a fairly large study. 73% of them said that they were satisfied with their experience of UK fertility clinics, which was just a slight decrease, nothing significant, on the figure in 2018. And I think there's a temptation to think that's fine, but don't forget that means that a quarter of patients weren't satisfied, which is actually quite a lot of people coming to your clinic and leaving not feeling satisfied. And satisfied in itself is actually quite a low bar to reach. It doesn't mean they feel they had a great service at the clinic. And that figure actually reflects a much earlier study carried out for fertility clinics abroad some years ago, which found that 25% of patients felt they had a poor experience in UK clinics, and only 3% described it as excellent. So there's clearly some way to go with work on this. There were also some differences in the HFEA survey in the responses. So Black and Asian patients were considerably less likely to be satisfied, and also patients over 40. And the HFEA thought that might be to do with the fact that these groups were less likely to be successful in their treatment outcomes. But we do often see patients at the Fertility Alliance who are very happy with clinics where their treatment hasn't worked, and also patients who aren't happy with the clinic who didn't think it did particularly well in terms of supporting them when they have had a successful outcome. So I think it's often a bit more nuanced than that. There are also some geographical differences. So patients in the northeast of England had the highest satisfaction rates, and patients in the Wales had the lowest. And the HFEA don't give any suggestions as to why that might be, and it doesn't seem to be related to funding either. And in fact, they did also look at the difference in satisfaction rates between privately funded and NHS funded treatment, and they were really pretty similar. And finally, single patients were also less satisfied with support, and with the levels of empathy and understanding shown in the clinic particularly. And it may be that they noticed that more acutely than those who have a partner. So what were the key things that patients weren't particularly happy with? Well, first of all, there was the level of support offered, and also access to fertility counselling. And we know that IVF is hugely emotionally challenging, and that this level of support that they get really matters to patients. Problems with communication, administration and coordination, these can be huge things for patients and can make all the difference. And I think you might be surprised how often they come up when we hold patient groups, because small sort of admin or coordination muddles can actually really colour the whole experience of treatment for your patients. And lack of empathy and care makes a huge impact, unsurprisingly, as do delays to treatment. And we know that now many patients are not only waiting to access specialist care or specialist treatment, but they're also getting stuck in the system much earlier on. So they're waiting for GP tests or for routine gynae procedures before IVF, and that's causing delays too. And then there's the cost of treatment, which can be, we know, prohibitive for many patients. And finally, the way that their partner, where they had one, was involved, or perhaps I should say was not involved in the treatment process. So I'm going to talk about all of these in a bit more detail, but I'm going to start with lack of support. And only 76% of the patients surveyed by the HFEA said that the availability of counselling had been clearly communicated when they carried out their survey in 2022. They didn't actually ask the same question this time around, but there's no reason to presume that that might be any different. And it's important to remember that the offer of counselling is actually a licence condition, so it's not optional whether you offer it or not. But I wonder how you do that. Do you add it in as a quick aside? Do you say they might find it helpful? Or do you actually make it sound as if seeing a counsellor could be a really positive step? We're often told, oh, not all my patients want counselling, they're not all keen on it. But also we're told by patients quite often that they feel that it's mentioned in quite a negative way, or that it's barely mentioned at all, that it's just at the bottom of an information leaflet that they're given. So we have a people's panel at the Fertility Alliance who help us with our advocacy. And we spoke to them about this, and 56% of the members felt that their clinic didn't provide the emotional support they needed, which is sad because that's more than half. And they also felt that the emotional aspect of going through treatment was an integral part of treatment process and that it should be seen as that. So they wanted counselling to be included in the cost of their treatment. And I know that you may have patients who genuinely don't want counselling, but there may be others who aren't being told about how it could help. So I think it's really important to think about that. But also, do you have long waiting times for your counsellor? Because that's the other thing that causes a lot of dissatisfaction. If patients do finally decide, yes, I will go and see the counsellor, and then they've got a 2-month waiting list before they can see them, and they wouldn't be able to get an appointment when they're actually doing their treatment anyway. So I think from that perspective, it's worth remembering that support doesn't just come from the counsellor, it comes from everyone in the clinic, from the receptionist to the consultant. And I think if you're all aware of how things might feel for your patients, then you'll be able to do the right thing by them. And we spoke to our People's Panel members about their experiences and what they wanted you to know. And they said they wanted you to think more about the emotional experience for patients. They sometimes didn't feel you were interested in their views on things, and that it's important that professionals are kind and thoughtful in their approach, because infertility and treatment is hard enough. And I think we all know how true that is, and that kindness can go a very long way. Another thing highlighted in the HFEA survey was around information, and patients didn't always feel able to access the level of information that they wanted. One big thing for patients was around their individual chance of success, and 27% said that wasn't made clear to them, which was a slight improvement since the last HFEA survey, but is still probably not really particularly good. And of course, sometimes you simply can't give this, but I think when patients feel that the whole subject is just glossed over and they're given some kind of general success rate and suggested these might apply to them, it can be really difficult. But it's not just that information that patients struggle with, it's more general information about fertility. And we did a survey when I was at the RCOG in 2019 as part of a fertility forum event that we organised. And we asked women about their views about information about fertility. And 86% said that they found information about fertility was confusing and contradictory, and 76% were unsure whether information that they were getting was impartial. And I think it can be really difficult to know who to trust when different clinics and different doctors are telling you completely different things and giving you different advice, which we know is what happens all the time for many of these patients. And that's why they end up looking for their own information and talking to one another in online forums about these things and searching on social media. And I think it's particularly worrying in the light of the very recent study from doctors at King's Fertility, which found that just 0.2% of social media posts about fertility were accurate and credible, of high quality and easily readable, which is really very worrying. And I think perhaps part of the problem at the moment is that there's too much advice from too many people. And there's never been more information out there, but it's never been harder to make sense of it. And people do want information. They want to do what they can to make a difference to the outcome of their treatment. But if you Google anything to do with fertility, you just get hundreds of pages of information. And there are so many people giving advice, especially on Instagram, where you don't know who they are or where they're getting their information from, or sometimes even whether they're being paid by someone. There are just dozens of fertility nutrition experts, fertility coaches, all out there giving their own advice about what patients ought to be doing. And it can be incredibly confusing. So I'm sure you're all familiar to some degree with the advice about pineapples, because there's a lot out there on the subject. It does vary a bit. So you may read that you should eat pineapple for 3 days after embryo transfer, or you may read that you should just eat the core, which you shave into 5 slices and eat 1 a day for 5 days. But you may also find that you're meant to drink a pint of pure pineapple juice every day, although there are others who say you should avoid the juice at all costs and just eat the core. So perhaps it's not surprising that we came across a while ago a post titled "Help" on one of the patient forums from a patient saying she was desperately worried because her doctor hadn't given her any information about what was best to do about pineapples. A lot of people are suggesting that you should eat a portion of McDonald's fries as soon as you can after transfer to improve implantation. But then there are other people telling you that you need to avoid junk food at all costs. Everyone does seem to be agreed that you need to keep your feet warm when you're going through treatment at all times, because apparently warm feet equals a warm and inviting womb. There's different advice about milk. Should you drink a pint of it a day, or should you avoid dairy at all costs? It's a similar thing with raspberry leaf tea. Is that a good thing for fertility, or does it cause contractions? And pomegranates, do they improve sperm quality? Do they increase blood flow to the uterus, or do they cause contractions as well? And then you get all the things like the crystals, the charms. You may not know this, but you can actually buy fertility spells on Etsy, starting at the discounted price of just £6.95 for a fertility spell, but going up to £175.62 for a powerful spell. And these have all got very good reviews from people. Then there are the complementary therapists. Some patients almost believe now that if you're going to do IVF, you have to do acupuncture in order for the IVF to work. There's a type of coaching which has something called an IVF enhancement program, IVF enhancement process, which claims to double IVF success rates for a mere £997. Apparently you do this through positive thinking, but can you imagine how bad someone feels having paid £997 for the coaching in positive thinking when their treatment doesn't work? Who do they blame? They don't blame the person who's taken their £997. They tend to think it's only their own fault for not being positive enough. And we asked our People's Panel what they felt about the information offered by clinics. And as you can see from the quotes here, many felt it was still lacking. Some of the respondents felt they were given enough information, but about half didn't. And these are some of their responses. And this is why so many patients we find asking one another complex medical questions on online forums. So what can you do in terms of better information to your patients? What do they need, and what should you be offering? Well, we believe that the more honest and evidence-based information you give, the less likely it is that your patients are going to need to seek out non-evidence-based information online. So when you're with your patients, listen to what they're asking. Think about how anxious and worried they may be, and do let them ask some of those silly questions. Try not to use jargon. It's your world and your language, but don't forget it doesn't always make sense to your patients. And back up anything that you say with written information. And I'm not suggesting that you hand out piles and piles of leaflets, but give them links to reliable sources of information. In that way, I think it's important to think about the things that you trust yourself. So the BFS and the HFEA both have really good information on their websites. So let your patients know about these. We're actually still building our information resources at the Fertility Alliance, but we do have a growing YouTube channel with information from professionals, which is all evidence-based, and patient experiences. We also have recordings of our interviews with authors about fertility books. And these things are all there and for your patients to access completely free of charge. And I think the more information you give your patients, the more it can help them feel in control. And if they feel supported and well informed, they're going to be calmer and less stressed. They're less likely to get upset and be full of worry and questions. They're more likely to understand what's happening to them and to understand their treatment and what they need to do at the right time. And all of those things just make your job so much easier. So I think it's really a win-win situation. Moving on to some practical matters, we know that you're busy in clinics, you might be in a hurry, but the thing that I think we would say is if you don't have time for your patients, who do you have time for? And they do sometimes feel that they're rather ignored or overlooked during the treatment process. Treatment is undignified, it's intrusive, and you hold all the power. They really feel that power imbalance. So think about how you deal with that. How do you communicate with your patients? How easy is it for them to get in touch with you? And does your admin let you down? You may have the best lab and the best clinic staff, but if your patients can't get through to you on the phone or by email, and if they can't get the information they need when they do get hold of you, or more worryingly, if they're told the wrong thing, and we do hear from patients all the time that these things happen, they can very quickly lose faith in a clinic. And is it possible for your patients to see people from the same team each time they come in? Or do you at least know who they are? And I can't tell you how alarming it is for patients to come in and feel that you're not really sure where they're up to with their treatment or what they've been doing or what they've been doing next. And don't forget, they're trusting you with their precious eggs or sperm or embryos. They're allowing you to intervene in what's usually one of the most private parts of their lives. So I think you need to respect that and try to treat them with the respect that they deserve. And how do you deal with negative outcomes, or even how do you support your staff when it comes to breaking bad news to patients? These things are really important, and we know it can be hard. But I think what we would always say is a little empathy, a little kindness can go a very long way. So what do your patients say? Well, actually, two things we often hear complaints about from patients is around the positivity in clinics, where people are actually reluctant to acknowledge that treatment doesn't always work. And patients then can end up feeling that they've let everyone down if they don't get a positive outcome. And the other thing is around feeling rushed and hurried. And people often talk about feeling as if they were on a conveyor belt or in a sausage factory, and as if they're a bit annoying if they ask questions. So I think it's important to be aware of those things when you're dealing with patients. Another vital part of the NHS patient experience at the moment is waiting times. And although this isn't always within your remit to change, I think it's important to understand the impact this can have on patient experience and the need to support patients through this. So we did a survey last year, and 41% of the respondents had waited more than 6 months to be seen at an NHS fertility clinic, and 14% had waited more than a year. More than half had had to wait for tests or other procedures before they could start their treatment. And 78% of those who had to wait were waiting for more than 3 months, with nearly a third waiting for more than 6 months. And for those having treatment funded by the NHS, 42% had waited more than 6 months after being told that they'd need it, and 20% had waited more than a year. And this was having a huge impact because patients were really worried that these waiting times might actually impact their chances of ever having a family of their own. And many said that it meant that they felt pushed into the private sector, but that they then struggled to pay. Which brings us on to the cost of treatment. And we know that the CMA, Competition and Markets Authority, in their recent report found that fertility treatment costs aren't always clear. And I think it's really important to be aware of this. A third of patients responding to our survey said that it wasn't clear to them at the start of their treatment how much it was going to cost. And we look at the headline prices on websites, which are often incredibly different to the reality. So why would you have things like sedation for egg collection or blood tests or scans being charged as additional costs on top of the cost of IVF? Patients might not realise that these are all actually part of their treatment, and they may not have anticipated paying any extra for them. I'm sure that clinic staff always appreciate, how little some patients earn, or what their disposable income is. For many patients, the sums that fertility treatment can cost seem absolutely huge and quite insurmountable. How are they going to get that money together? And they're not necessarily going to say that to you in the clinic. If you say to them, well, I can treat you and you can go ahead next month, they're not going to say, well, where am I going to find the money? They're going to go away and find it. And we know from our survey that 30% had borrowed from family and 27% had used credit cards or loans. And that might be fine if a cycle works. But what about if it doesn't? Where are they going to get the money for the next one? And the final thing I want to discuss was around partners. We know that partners often feel very left out when it comes to the treatment process, and that can be really difficult. And I think particularly, if it's a male factor problem and the female partner is having to go through all of the treatment, it can make men feel really, really awful. So how do you involve them? How do you make them feel part of the process? Do you actually treat them as a couple going through treatment together? Or do you focus all the time on the person who's actually having the IVF treatment? And what about same-sex couples? Is your clinic inclusive for them? Have you thought about the language that they use in things like your patient information or the forms that they might fill in and how that might seem to them? I think it's really important to look at those with a slightly critical eye and just think about whether you're really able to say that you're a fully inclusive clinic. But I don't want to end on an entirely gloomy note, because many of you are doing a lot to help your patients and they really appreciate it when you are supportive. You'd be surprised how much difference some small things can make to your patients. And these are just some of the responses from our panel about things their clinics had done well and that they were keen to share. So I was given space to talk, to ask questions. If I emailed, there'd always be a response by the next day. The nurses were great, kind and reassuring, weekend service especially supportive. And I think the final one about kindness is particularly important. They were really kind people and that made a huge difference. And I think sometimes we don't rate kindness highly enough in what makes a difference between a fine or decent clinic and a really outstanding one. Kindness doesn't cost anything, but it can really genuinely transform the patient experience. So if you feel inspired to improve your patient support and experience, do get in touch with us. We can offer your patients support and information, evidence-based information. We run a number of different online groups, and we also have one for people working in clinics or in other related areas of reproductive medicine, midwifery, who have their own fertility issues. So if that applies to you or to anyone you know, do get in touch with us about that group. We also have one general group. We have a men's group, which we run with Nexus Fertility. And we have a new group for people who are thinking of giving up on treatment, which we run with Kelly De Silva. So we've got a whole range of groups. We also believe very firmly in working with the sector so that we've got strong professional support. And we've got an absolutely amazing advisory board, patron and trustees. And we work with them to ensure that everything that we do is evidence-based and is fit for purpose. But we also work with patients because we believe that we should co-produce everything that we do to ensure that we're offering patients the right resources at the right time and in the right way. We also campaign for NICE guidance to be followed and for equitable access to treatment for everyone. And we support fertility research because we actually feel very strongly that gold standard patient and public engagement can make all the difference when it comes to fertility research. So again, if you're working in research, if you've got any research projects that you want patient engagement with, please do get in touch with us. And finally, we always operate in an ethical, open and transparent way. So do follow us on social media, do get in touch. And I'd like to end by saying that we're also always really keen to hear from you about how we can improve what we do too. So if you have any ideas about what we ought to be doing as a charity to better support your patients, please do just let us know. Thank you.
Hi, Kate, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Really fantastic presentation. Thank you so, so much. It was really hard hitting, but I find personally, for me, I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so, so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to join you today.
Thank you. Any questions at all? I don't think there's any questions or comments.
No, just thank you very much, Kate. Thank you very much, Kate. I think this is a reminder of for all of us, about being kind and thinking about on the other side, isn't it? Because otherwise, sometimes we are all very busy in the clinic, and then getting on with the treatment and not thinking too much about the other aspects about communicating with the patients more effectively and efficiently. And I think it is really worrying to see that 0.2% of the internet stuff are wrong. And do you have any sort of an idea about how this can be improved? Or is that banning some of them?
I think it's really difficult. I think that it's so sort of ingrained now, some of these internet influencer type people. I think the best thing that everyone can do is educate their patients about why they're not to be trusted, and the fact that some of them may actually have vested interests behind what they're saying, which I think isn't always clear to patients. So I think whatever you can do, I always think if you give your patients access to lots of sources of good information, they're less likely to be vulnerable to that. But it is difficult because people constantly want to do whatever they can to make a difference.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
That's been brilliant. Thank you. That sort of concludes the day, Emily and Jay. I think that's our final speaker. That's been a fantastic day. So thank you for organising a fantastic programme. Hope everybody's had a wonderful day. The only thing that's left for me to say, are there any other comments you want to say, Jay or Emily, before I put the thing for the next year's? So I think the only thing we'll put the date for next year's symposium up, which is the 5th of June 2026. So pencil that into the diaries, and there'll be a link there to register for that, really. And so I'll stop sharing that. But if I can get everybody, if we can get everybody to turn their cameras on. I hope you've all had a good and educational day. I've certainly learned a lot there during the day. But if you can put your cameras on before you leave, just to make sure you're still there and not snoozing and left your apps on. Linda's still there. Emma's there. Just wave as you log off, please. That'd be lovely to see everybody. Hope you had a good day. We'll send you a feedback form. And then obviously once that's filled in, Jane will send a certificate of attendance. We'll give you a couple of minutes to log on, after which we'll realise who's snoozing on the job and left their app on, and we'll then start to get people to leave. So if you turn your cameras on and wave as you go, Uzma, Leanne, Linda, nice seeing you, Onig. Hope you had a good day.
Very informative.
Fantastic. Ashley, Claire, Guardia. Thank you. Nigel.
Thank you.
Excellent. Victoria, have you got a question, or did you want to say something? Nope, hand's gone down.
No, I just wanted to wave before leaving.
Okay, thank you. That's a wave. All right, thank you. Thank you. Lovely seeing you all. See you guys. Yep. Okay. So we'll start now slowly. If people haven't signed off yet, then we'll start signing them out so the meeting can be concluded. Emily and Jay, if you can just click on the things on the right hand, dots on the right hand side, and just remove people from the meeting, and then we'll slowly work our way down the list. Turn the cameras on, that's lovely. So everybody, thank you. Sartorius, thank you. And then there were 4. All right, guys, well done. Good day.
It went very well.
Well done. That was fantastic. It's all, it all ran smoothly, and you ran and chaired it very well, both of you. So well done, Emily.
No, thank you. Emily, you did very well. This is really a good one.
It's great
I don't think
effort.
in the when I was doing it, this was mandatory requirement, isn't it? Doing is it not now?
What, to organise a meeting? Yeah, you were telling me that was
Yeah.
at Sturmis. It was mandatory, wasn't it?
So no, but I think it's
well,
gone
there
well.
we go. I've done one of my mandatory requirements.
Well, no, but I hope hopefully you've learned lots of new skills as a result.
Oh yeah, and I have to
of
admit
course,
that
yeah,
like the counselling, I was a little bit like smart, not smart, maybe not the right word, but like the counselling one is one of the SIPs that's hard to get for my
Yeah.
sub-spec. The PGT, I'm definitely reflecting on a couple of presentations because that was a really excellent PGT presentation. And as I said, I noticed there when the cameras went on, there was 5 or 6 sub-spec trainees on the call.
Yeah.
And I had said to them in particular, if you can't get the whole day, try and get Friday afternoon, because those ones, like all the ones for Friday afternoon, endometriosis, Jay's talk, Ali's talk, they're all things in our curriculum. So it was it was to my own benefit as well. So
Fantastic. No, what really well done. Once
I
you're
like
back,
I like the book one, isn't it? The way that she was saying about the book. That's a very good this thing.
Yeah.
Book and pages, yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Jane. Thank you very much. Thank you,
All
Sumi.
right.
It was
Not at
fantastic.
all.
We've got a very good template, isn't it? And then
Yeah, it works.
I mean,
Yeah,
It
very
works every
seamless.
time.
we
Well,
know
the numbers
all the
are
time.
good. The numbers are good numbers, aren't they, in terms of attendance? Because people dip in and out. So when we download the attendance, I'll send you obviously a list of how many people there were. But a lot of the big meetings don't necessarily get that many, as many. But hopefully, we'll just increase the numbers each year. And you've just got to start working on next year's program, Emily. That's
Yeah,
We've got Emily. We've got
Yes.
Emily.
yeah. All right.
Well, as I said, we were very lucky. We just reached out and people, not one person said no to us. So
Yeah. Fantastic.
a lot of
No, well
goodwill.
done.
Well, thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend.
Have a lovely
and,
weekend, guys. All
I'll
right.
be in
You all
touch.
have.
I'll
Thank
catch up with you
you.
guys.
See you then.
Bye.
Well
Bye-bye.
done, Jane.
Bye. Bye.
See you
Thank
later.
Jane.
See ya.
See you,
See
Jane.
ya.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
good. I went
Yeah.
well. Really well.
Yeah.
They both knew what they were doing, and I was dipping in and out, but yeah.
Have you had a nice day?
It's all right. We just went to my sister's for breakfast. We went to pray. We came back. So I managed to squeeze all of that in, and then we get waiting to just host the sisters. They'll bring lots of food, and Debbie's doing some crispy duck with pancakes. That traditional Asian dish.
Yeah.
Well, we have it at Christmas, and
Yeah,
they
you're
now
going to say you have it Christmas, don't you?
they like now wanted it here as well. So
Yeah.
so
That's good then.
so it should be
I've
good.
got fish and chips.
Oh, that'd be good.
Just got Mark to cut. I've got Mark to do the chips. I'll do the. It's not, it's just fresh fish. It's not battered or anything. We don't have the battered stuff. But fish chips and mushy peas.
That's normally on a Friday, but it's too busy today. We've not had any lunch, so we'll hopefully get some. All right.
Yeah. All right.
Well, thanks very much, Jane, for supervising it all and making sure it all ran.
No, well, I did a bit, not a lot, but
it's because I think that Google Drive works really well. Because we're giving access, and then they can just upload it and the videos and everything else, the recording. So I think it's all working well.
No, it was all right. We had a few people who I had to mute because they come on and they've got no idea, have they? So but it was quite easy to manage the people coming in this time. So so it was quite steady. So it wasn't too bad. But all right, have a good weekend.
I'll catch you next week.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
take care. Bye.
Bye.